In the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew, we have God with us, Emmanuel. At the end, we have God with us, by now revealed and glorified. And we see also the authority that is his, having conquered, since he came as a child. And we have this magnificent conclusion until the end of time, as it says literally, even unto the consummation of the ages. Alpha and Omega. It is interesting to observe how human beings across the centuries, from the beginning of time, have handled the game of existence. In the early stages of our humanity, of which nearby Newgrange is a good instance and vestige, there was a certain authenticity of nudity, poverty, and powerlessness, a fight against time, a fight against the unknown, a battle against the dark, clinging on to rays of light, and going very soon back from whence they'd come. That characterized also the High Middle Ages and the period when death was ever present, as witnessed by the macabre dances on the walls of certain buildings, where kings, bishops dance hand in hand with paupers, with the apparent glory on their head, but then skeletons underneath. Death, the great equalizer. And these became very popular in the 1300s because of the Black Plague, 1347-48, when death was everywhere. And we still have it in one of our nursery rhymes. Ring a roses, pocket full of posies, a tissue, we all fall down. They have to come out in rings, and they will be coughing and falling in death. As time went on, man became reasonable, and we have, in the face of Voltaire, the smile of reason. Words like, Christ came to give us the kingdom, and we have the church, and so on. We have grown up. And we have then, in this so-called enlightenment, the beginnings of self-sufficiency for human reason, no longer subject to its author. In the revolution of culture and of society, in the beginning of the last century, we have, starting with philosophy and very quickly coming into action in politics and revolution, the explicit denial, based on the assumption that only what is feelable, the material, matters, and therefore the invisible and the immaterial are cancelled from the horizon. Marxism becomes politicized in communism and conquers much of our planet. Indeed, to this day, one of the most densely populated parts of the world, China, is still red. In those days, it was fairly clear what was going on. It is only fairly recently that Satan has managed to infiltrate, without people realizing it, normal countries, normal cultures, and without violent revolution, to arrive at a situation where a new religion has taken the place of all religion, secularism, where the official language is godless, and the accepted norm is that which cancels the invisible from the equation. Satan is so subtle that very few actually realize what has been going on before their eyes and with their tacit consent. If one still looks around the average Christian family in Western civilized society, one will see that the television is on in the evening, all evening, that or the computer, or even both. And people massively are passively absorbing the gospel of secularism in the form, for instance, of its recreation, where society is mirrored and fed, it's a vicious circle, by a plethora of soaps, where the bottom line is, the norm is, God does not enter into the equation. If accidentally he comes in, it will be a very subtle form of his presence in the form of some New Age practice which has become a new acceptable norm. The communist revolution took place in the most mystical country on earth. La Sainte Russe, Holy Russia, dense with saints in every nook and cranny. One cannot imagine the sanctity of this country until 1917. A very strong presence on Mount Athos until then. And, different from Greece, icons, therefore, could easily come out of that situation. In Greece they can't. They belong to the country, as it were, as part of their heritage. But they could be sold second-hand by the hundred. And here we have an icon sanctified by centuries of prayer and incense in a church. And you can see from the side that it's been wrenched away from where it belonged, probably in a violent situation in Holy Russia. The document is on the back, indicating it is an authentic icon done according to the rules, which involve fasting and so on. Indeed, a friend of mine sometimes comes to my place when she has finished an icon and asks that it be placed next to the altar for 40 days and then chrismated. This is what we are feasting today, the Holy Trinity. Not understood and expressed in exactly the same way in the East as in the West, because who can understand anyway the mystery whence we come? We just adore and ponder and await the moment of truth. One day, a great philosopher in Cambridge, who had denied everything with regard to the validity of any discourse within the field of logic, of all that pertained to divinity. It was the school of logical positivism that denied the philosophical and logical value of any discourse involving the beyond and its inhabitant. It just does not have philosophical sense. It was the period of the death of God, in inverted commas. And in that period, it was either Oxford or Cambridge, but one prof or theologian, or wouldn't be a theologian, more like a philosopher, put on the door of one of the college chapels, "God is dead," and signed it with his name. A few years later, he caught some illness and petered out. And somebody went to the same notice board by the college chapel and wrote, "Dom so-and-so is dead. Signed, God." A.J. Eyre also got ill, and they operated him in the operating theatre, and he was petering out. His heart stopped beating, and he started on the journey. And he copped on, he was actually going somewhere. This was no philosophy. He was alone. He could sense there was a change happening. He was no longer in control. He was being moved willy-nilly along some strange tunnel towards a light, but it wasn't white, it was red. In the operating theatre, they saved him at the last second, got him back, got his heart beating again. From that moment onwards, he was slightly less vocal. God is patient. God is not like us, who needs immediate action. He knows, because he sees, that time is longer than what we see, and that noise is only relative. He does not want robots, and so he sits back in awe at the mystery he's made. I will not interfere with the beauty of my creation. I will not oblige anyone. And so, man is like God. He can create his eternity by yes and no. And so, the dignity of our God, as we see in the Gospel, is of one who calmly waits and does not insist on victory immediately. However, he does all he can to avoid the ultimate disaster. And ultimate disaster is at our doorstep all the time. In fact, this morning, before I came, I had a house full of travellers, and there was pain in the air. A little lassie of 13 has just hung herself. She is, as they can be in that situation, already engaged to be married, but her future husband is in RD in St. Bridget's for some reason, and she couldn't cope. She was found hanging. Some friend of hers found her and asked immediately for help from adults, and she was rushed to hospital, unconscious. They did everything they could to bring her back. She was on life support. The doctor decided that they had to take her off and see what happened, essentially, expecting her to stop. However, the heart has not stopped, but there has been no visible reaction, no coming out of the coma. So, whether she has some life or whether she will go on, we don't know. The fact is this: she probably has, in a few seconds of time on earth, messed up all her possible time on earth, and we only hope she hasn't done the same for eternity. But all this is a society where essentially the one who made us no longer runs us, because we have grown up and we don't need him. If we now want to have a society where we can rethink even the essence of marriage and create monsters without mothers and tenderness at home, then we calmly also will cop on when it's too late. We have messed up the beautiful creation of the Blessed Trinity, which is all about essential love. For the projection of hatred violence, wrath, ugliness, cursing and vendetta that is projected at us from the box and now also from the cybersphere is the antipodes of the life of the Trinity, for which we, miserable nothings, were made, and we preferred the company of his enemy. I just passed this round in the context of what young people now are doing this very week, finals. Been praying a lot for people doing finals because it hit me. All this energy goes into getting first-class honours, and often not a thought is given about the final exam at the end. In Rome, just before finals, we all went to the military cemetery on Nettuno, where during the end of the war, hundreds of American soldiers lost their lives freeing Italy. Fields of white graves. They were of our age, and we were with Americans, and they sang a very moving song by these graves. And I said to a nun who was with us, an Albertine nun, it's a pity that we couldn't go into the last exam without all these finals here. We were just thinking, wouldn't it be great to go into glory without all these secondary issues? And yet we thought, what is life if the final exam is not thought of and then failed?